Hello! In this session, let's see how we can add our brand new enemy group to a chunk. So, for that, we are going to open the prefabs folder and open the chunks folder. Perfect. Let's now select our medium chunk and duplicate it by pressing Ctrl D. And let's call it medium chunk enemies. Let's say maybe 20 because the group will have 20 enemies. Cool. Before opening it, let's drag our enemy group and drop it in the prefabs folder. That way we can use it anywhere we want. So let's open our chunk now, double click it. Perfect, here it is. And now we can go back to our prefabs folder, drag the enemy group and drop it in the hierarchy. Cool. Where is it? Here it is. Let's set the Z position to 0 for it to be at the center of the chunk. And let's change the amount of enemies to 20. Perfect. Now we can go back to our scene right there, select the chunk manager, select the level 00, and change one of these chunks to the chunk we've just created. So let's select any one of these, drag the medium chunk enemies 20 to the position 1, let's say, and hit play. Now you can see that 20 enemies have been created in our level. Perfect, let's hit play and we should have 0 runners. Cool, it's working. Before adding the game over, we can add a little bubble above the enemy group again, like we've done for the runners, so that we can have an idea of how many enemies are in that group. So let's do that right away. For that, let's open the prefabs folder, drag our enemy group into the scene, like so. Cool. Let's set the Z position to 0, because we want to duplicate our bubble that we've used for our crowd. So let's duplicate it, drag it and drop it onto the enemy group. Maybe we can rename it to bubble, simply. The crowd counter text is the same one, but the runner's parent will be the enemy group. But same issue as we've encountered for the player. We need to create an enemy parent right here. So let's create an empty game object and call it enemies, maybe just enemies actually. Select the bubble and drag the enemies game object onto the runner's parent right here. Perfect. Now we need to change our enemy group script a bit to specify that we want to create the enemies under the enemies game object. Okay, let's double click it. Let's create a new field for the enemy's parent. So let's make it serialized, private, transform, enemy's parent. Perfect. Let's copy that field and paste it right here in the instantiate method. You can also replace this transform right here by enemy's parent, but this doesn't change anything because the enemy's parent have the same position as our enemy group and the same rotation, all along with the same scale. Okay, so now let's select the enemy group, drag the enemy's game object onto our new field right here, and that's it. We can now apply these changes to the enemy group prefab by clicking overrides and applying all the changes. Perfect. You can check if the changes have been applied to the chunk we've created by going to the prefabs folder, chunks, medium chunk enemies 20, select the enemy group here, and check if the enemy's game object have been created, and it has, along with the bubble. Perfect. Let's hit play. And you can see that now there is a bubble above the enemy group that's telling us that there are 20 enemies. Cool. You can change this value now by maybe saying like we only want 6 enemies in our group. Hit play. And you can see that it has changed here again. Perfect. But when there is 0 enemies, the bubble is still there. So let's change that. For that, you can open the crowd counter class, and in the update method, We want to constantly check if the runner's parent has no more children. So either we don't have any enemies or we don't have any runners. And if that's the case, just destroy the bubble or hide it. It's your choice. So we can say if runner's parent dot child count is less or equals to 0, then we can just destroy game object. Perfect. Let's go back to Unity. Hit play. And now when fighting all the enemies, the bubble should disappear. And that's what happens. Cool. Awesome, guys. Now that we've done this, we can finally add our game over panel and the level complete panel. So we are going to do one of these in the next session. So stay tuned.